Hey, everybody, happy Friday to you. It is Good Friday, and we are nearing the end of Holy Week. As you know, each day we have taken a little bit of time and we've done a little teaching on some of the events that took place on this given day in history over 2,000 years ago during the original Passion Week. Now, some people call it Passion Week, some call it Holy Week. It's that time from Palm Sunday to Easter. And I want to just dig right into today, Friday, and see what happened on this day. Many of you already are well aware, but I think it's great the way that we've been able to walk with Jesus each and every day and see some of the things as it transpired and as we lead up to today, the day that we know as Good Friday. Well, Good Friday actually began very early in the morning. In fact, some people might even say that it took place late Thursday night, early Friday morning. Not exactly sure, but John chapter 18, verses 2 through 12 records what happened that late Thursday night, early Friday morning. It goes like this: Judas, the betrayer, knew this place because Jesus had often gone there with his disciples. The leading priests and the Pharisees had given Judas a contingent of Roman soldiers and temple guards to accompany him. Now, with blazing torches, lanterns, and weapons, they arrived at the olive grove. Jesus fully realized all that was going to happen to him. So he stepped forward to meet them. "Who are you looking for?" he asked. "Jesus, the Nazarene," they replied. "I am he," Jesus said. Judas, who betrayed him, was standing there with them. As Jesus said, "I am he," they all drew back and fell to the ground. Once more he asked them, "Who are you looking for?" And again they replied, "Jesus, the Nazarene." "I told you that I am he," Jesus said. "And since I am the one that you want, let these others go." He did this to fulfill his own statement: "I did not lose a single one of those that you've given me." Then we'll pick it up on verse 10. It says, "Then Simon Peter drew a sword and slashed off the right ear of Malchus, the high priest's slave. But Jesus said to Peter, 'Put your sword back into its sheath. Shall I not drink from the cup of suffering that the Father has given me?' So the soldiers, their commanding officer, and the temple guards arrested Jesus and tied him up." Well, we're not exactly sure. Some people would say that happened late Thursday night, some early Friday morning, but the next set of major events that took place on this day, I guess, could be classified as the trials of Jesus. And notice I said trials as in plural form because he didn't just go through one trial. He went through many. The first one was actually recorded in John chapter 18. Verse 13 and 14 says this: "First, they took him to Annas, since he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest at the time. Caiaphas was the one who had told the other Jewish leaders, 'It's better that one man should die for the people.'" And then if we fast forward in John chapter 18 to verse 19, it says this: "Inside, the high priest began asking Jesus about his followers and what he'd been teaching them. Jesus replied, 'Everyone knows what I teach. I've preached regularly in the synagogue and the temple, where the people gather. I've not spoken in secret. Why are you asking me this question? Are those who heard me? Ask them. They know what I said.' Then one of the temple guards, standing nearby, slapped Jesus across the face. 'Is that the way that you answer the high priest?' he demanded. Jesus replied, 'If I said anything wrong, you must prove it. But if I'm speaking the truth, why are you beating me?' Then Annas bound Jesus and sent him to Caiaphas, the high priest." Now, we're going to read about the trial with Caiaphas next, that we're going to read from Mark chapter 14, and we're going to read how he recorded it in verses 53 through 65. It's entitled Jesus Before the Council. They took Jesus to the high priest's home, where the leading priest, the elders, and the teachers of religious law had gathered. Meanwhile, Peter followed him at a distance and went right into the high priest's courtyard. There he sat with the guards, warming himself by the fire. Now, as we scooch ahead to verse 55, it says, "Inside, the leading priest and the entire high council were trying to find evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death. But they couldn't find any. Many false witnesses spoke against him, but they contradicted each other. Finally, some men stood up and gave this false testimony. 'We heard him say, I'll destroy the temple made with human hands, and in 3 days I'll build another made without human hands.' But even then, they didn't get their story straight. Then the high priest stood up before the others and asked Jesus, 'Well, aren't you going to answer these charges? What do you have to say for yourself?' But Jesus was silent, and he made no reply. Then the high priest asked him, 'Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?' Jesus simply said, 'I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated in the place of power at God's right hand and coming on the clouds of heaven.' Then the high priest tore his clothing to show his horror and said, 'Why do we need other witnesses? You've all heard this blasphemy. What's your verdict?' 'Guilty,' they all cried. 'He deserves to die.' Then some of them began to spit at him, and they blindfolded him and they beat him with their fists. 'Prophesy to us,' they jeered, and the guards slapped him as they took him away." Now, I want to continue to read the events of the day according to how Mark recalled them in the book of Mark, chapter 15, verses 1 through 39. It's pretty lengthy, but I think we really need to gather this all in. It's entitled, to start out with in chapter 15, Jesus' trial before Pilate. It says, "Very early in the morning, the leading priest, the elders, and the teachers of the religious law, the entire high council, met to discuss their next step. They bound Jesus, they led him away, and they took him to Pilate, the Roman governor. Pilate asked Jesus, 'Are you the king of the Jews?' Jesus replied, 'You've said it.' Then the leading priest kept accusing him of many crimes, and Pilate asked him, 'Aren't you going to answer them? What about all these charges that they're bringing against you?' But Jesus said nothing, much to Pilate's surprise. Now it was the governor's custom each year during the Passover celebration to release one prisoner, anyone that the people requested. One of the prisoners at that time was Barabbas, a revolutionary who had committed murder in the uprising. The crowd went to Pilate and they asked him to release a prisoner as usual. 'Would you like me to release to you this king of the Jews?' Pilate asked. He realized by now that the leading priest had arrested Jesus out of envy. But at this point, the leading priest had stirred up the crowd so much that they demanded the release of Barabbas instead of Jesus. Pilate asked them, 'Then what should I do with this man that you call the king of the Jews?' They shouted back, 'Crucify him!' 'Why?' Pilate demanded. 'What crime has he committed?' But the mob roared even louder, 'Crucify him!' So, to pacify the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He ordered Jesus flogged with a lead-tipped whip, then turned him over to the Roman soldiers to be crucified. The soldiers took Jesus into the courtyard of the governor's headquarters, called the Praetorium, and they called out the entire regiment. They dressed him in a purple robe, and they wove thorn branches into a crown, and they stuck it on his head. Then they saluted him and they taunted him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they struck him on the head with a reed stick. They spit on him. And they dropped to their knees and they mocked him in worship. When they were finally tired of mocking him, they took off the purple robe and they put his own clothes on him again. Then they led him away to be crucified. A passerby named Simon, who was from Cyrene, was coming in from the countryside just then, and the soldiers forced him to carry Jesus' cross. And they brought Jesus to a place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull. They offered him wine drugged with myrrh, but when he refused it, the soldiers then nailed him to the cross. They divided his clothes and they threw dice to decide who would get each piece of clothing. It was 9 o'clock in the morning when they crucified him. A sign announced the charge against him. It read, "King of the Jews." 2 revolutionaries were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. The people passing by shouted abuse, shaking their head in mockery. "Look at you now," they yelled at him. "You said that you were going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. Well, save yourself and come down from that cross." The leading priests and teachers of the religious law, they also mocked Jesus. "He saved others," they scoffed, "but he can't even save himself. Let this Messiah, this King of Israel, come down from the cross so that we can see it and finally believe him." Even the men who were crucified with Jesus ridiculed him. At noon, darkness fell across the whole land until 3 o'clock. Then at 3 o'clock, Jesus crawled out in a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you abandoned me?" Some of the bystanders misunderstood and thought that maybe he was calling out to the prophet Elijah. One of them ran and filled a sponge with some sour wine, holding it up on a reed on a stick so that he could drink it. "Wait," he said. "Let's see whether Elijah comes to take him down." Then Jesus uttered another loud cry, and he breathed his last. And the curtain to the sanctuary of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the Roman officer who stood facing him saw how he had died, he exclaimed, "This man truly was the Son of God." Well, guys, it's vitally important to remember that without Good Friday, without this terrible crucifixion, without the way that Jesus was beaten and mocked, disgraced, abused by everyone, without Good Friday, there is no Easter. We can't have Easter morning without Good Friday. You know, in order for there to be a resurrection, in order for there to be new life, first there has to be death. And you know what? That's not only true with Jesus. It's true for all of us. We all need to die. We need to die to our old habits. We need to die to our old lives. We need to die before we can live, born again, and live a life with Jesus as our Savior. Guys, that's some of the events that took place on Good Friday over 2,000 years ago. It hurts me to hear them. It hurts me to read them, to imagine my Savior going through all that for me. But it was necessary. It had to happen. So why don't you join us tomorrow on Saturday, and we'll see what was going on Saturday during the very first Passion Week. See you tomorrow, everybody.